everyone, I'm Chef AJ, and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is Howard Jacobson. Howard is the host of the popular Plant Yourself podcast and founder and president of Triangle Be Well, a health consulting service that empowers people to go from managing conditions to achieving true wellness. As a researcher, speaker, educator, and coach, Howard helps each client make informed decisions about options and take control of their health destiny. Howard is contributing author to T. Colin Campbell's Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition, and Dr. Garth Davis's Proteinaholic. He lives with his family in Pittsboro, North Carolina, where he likes to garden, practice Russian martial arts, play ultimate frisbee, and subvert the pecking order in his No Soup for You chicken sanctuary. That's adorable. Please welcome Howard Jacobson. Thank you so much for being here, Howard.
Oh, a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, I want you to tell people who you are, because you came out, you were like a bat out of hell. You came out of nowhere. I'm sure you existed, but I never heard of you. And then all of a sudden, you got your name on two of the greatest books out there in the plant-based world, just in general. They happen to be plant-based. You're speaking at Summerfest or on the cruise. Where did you come from?
Well, I've always been here, as far as I can remember. So the whole plant-based thing, I've had several careers. I was a school teacher for many years, and then I decided I wanted to take a vow of non-poverty, and I wanted to get into the business world. And so I stumbled my way into marketing and organization development, and did that for about 15 years. And while that was going on, I was very interested in health. I got between teaching and the business world, or sort of bridging the two. I went back to school to Temple University and got a master's of public health and a doctorate of health education. And so I got real interested in health. And then when I discovered the plant-based world, I discovered it more times than I like to admit. Then I would kind of forget and get seduced by popular culture again. But by 2004 and 5, I really got into it, and that's where I met Colin Campbell, who was speaking at a VegSource event, and he was talking about this new book of his that was about to come out called The China Study, and I was very impressed. And so I ordered the book as soon as it came out and devoured it. And I wrote a review of the book on Amazon, which was a fairly new thing at the time. Amazon wasn't all that big in sort of 2004, 2005, and the book itself was not very big at all. By the time I wrote the review, 6 weeks after publication, I was only the third review, which tells you, nowadays, you put a book, you go on social media, you tell your friends. If you're lucky, you'll get, 50 friends and family to write reviews the first week. And then as it spreads, the books we like now, I think the Starch Solution, has maybe 1,000. Whole is up there. China Study's got several thousand. But to be the third review is significant, because if people like the review, they voted up or down, this was helpful or not. And the ones that are voted most helpful tend to stay at the top. So by being first, I got pole position, and that review never lost it. So it's still number one or number two.
Wow.
So that's
yeah.
So that's a happy story, and it would have ended there, except our good friends at the Weston Price Foundation found the China Study and decided to make it their whipping boy. And they had an organized campaign of writing negative reviews of this book. And so unbeknownst to me, Dr. Campbell was sort of following this, and he would see these reviews come up and call him a charlatan and a vegan activist and all this stuff, and try to refute what he was saying in the book. And then my review would pop up on top of them. So he told me later, he started viewing it as a kind of like a shield, like this friendly protective review was the first thing people would see when they decided whether they wanted to buy the book or not. So like a year later, he called me out of the blue and to thank me for the review. I had no idea that he knew who I was. I met him briefly at this veg source, and I think I was online with like 700 other people to shake his hand. But my wife was like motioning to me. She says, "It's Colin Campbell on the phone," and I'm like, I don't know if I could string two intelligent words together. Like, this guy's my hero. But I managed to feign a semblance of cool, and chatted with him, and he invited our family to come. We were going to be up in upstate New York that summer, and he invited us to come visit, and we did, and we became friends.
And that's all from writing a review.
That's all from this. There's one thing that I've done in my life without any expectation of benefit. It's it's kind of hilarious.
It makes me want to go out and write like everybody I want to meet.
It's not a bad strategy.
Wow.
Actually, now I can look at it, very strategically. Like, if I want, I find out when someone's book is coming out. I write the first review of it. I write a good review. I've actually done that for a couple of friends whom I wanted to become better friends with. I wrote it for Chef Bryant Terry for his Afro-Vegan. I wrote a review for Rich Roll's Plant Power Way.
That's fantastic.
Because I wanted to get the word out, but also, I wanted them to know that I was a big supporter, and that's one way to do. Now that lightning struck, I'm like running around with a kite trying to get it to strike again and again.
That is so cool, though, because Whole's a great book, and then this new one you've got your name on. I mean, all your books have one word. I think that's your thing now. One word titles: Whole, Proteinaholic. Proteinaholic's just fabulous. I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Davis later on today, and that is such. I mean, were those books fun to write? Were they difficult to write? Because they're very content heavy, of course.
Yeah. So. I mean, I had written books about business before, and so I just I saw myself as an explainer. Like, I would take difficult things and try to make them simpler for people. And so that was when Dr. Campbell was he'd been working on Whole for like 5 years when he reached out to me and said, "I need some help getting this thing across the finish line." And so when I looked at it, I had no idea if I could help him. But he sent me the manuscript, and I printed it out, and I was living in South Africa at the time in a little rural village. We had to drive 90 minutes to find a printer cartridge for the old printer that someone had left at the house. I printed this whole thing out in Comic Sans in blue, because that's the only color they had, and I was going over it, reading it in the living room, and like every 10 pages, I'd go, "Oh my God," and I'd jump up and I'd point to something and show my wife or show my kids, like, "Can you believe this?" Like, you remember Whole, like, it's this like shocking expose after expose. And like, the world has got to know this story. And so I kind of conceptualized it as like a murder mystery, like a whodunit. And based on that, I was able to kind of put it together into a narrative that I think made it accessible. But it was very hard to write because I didn't understand most of it when I started.
Yeah. I had a co-writer, and you guys really do a wonderful job making stories better. That's for sure.
I spent. There's one chapter on the mixed function oxidase.
Oh my.
That I spent about 5 months getting it wrong, and I kept sending back drafts. He's like, "No," and he would try to explain it to me. But when you understand something really well, you're the worst person to explain it.
Interesting.
So I had to find a friend of mine who's a biologist who's at Duke was helping me with it. He was helping me put together the metaphors, flesh out the arguments, trying to get things right. I talked to one of the metaphors we used, like it was like a water treatment plant. So I actually went and interviewed people who run water treatment plants to see if I was getting it right. So it's fun now. It wasn't. Books are not fun to write, I don't find.
Oh, really? Yeah. Tell me about it. I've been struggling writing my next one for like the last 5 years. It isn't. It really isn't. It's a kind of a solitary thing,
Yeah, so no, so writing books is not fun. Learning about this stuff is fun.
Hmm.
You know, getting to work with these incredible people.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. You got the cream of the crop guy. That's fantastic. Congratulations on that. That must be the fun part.
yeah, so I mean, I started my podcast just so I could talk to cool people.
I know. Isn't it great that people will talk to you? People you don't know that are like that have wonderful books and ideas. I know it is so fun, isn't it?
Yeah. So so the writing. So after Whole came out, it was appreciated by the community, and then I met Garth at a Engine 2 event, and I'd already interviewed him. He was one of the people that I'd interviewed quite early on in the podcast because I found his Facebook posts so helpful. I kept
Yeah.
on referring to them, copying them, pasting them into Evernote, and relying on them later. So I want to know who this guy is. I'd never heard
Yeah.
of him before.
He's fantastic.
And so we met at the conference, and then he's like, I've got this book I've been working on
Uh-huh.
for five years. So like I feel like I'm the midwife of people of plant-based authors who've been in labor for half a decade.
Yeah, then maybe I should look to you because that's a great analogy. The first time I think it was 2 years ago when I first heard you speak at Vegetarian Summerfest, and what I really liked about you, Howard, is I speak a lot. For 4 years, I'm in a different conference, probably 50 weeks a year, so I see a lot of different speakers, a lot of different type of speakers, and some of them rely really heavily on their PowerPoint, which there's nothing wrong with that. But what they teach you in Toastmasters is that you better be able to give your talk if something happens, and if and I've seen them where the PowerPoint or the computer didn't work, and I'd see them, actually go into a tantrum and yell at the people because they couldn't get the technology to work, and it's really kind of speakers, freaking out like that on stage. And what I loved about you is you gave this talk in a very big room, the engineering building, and for whatever reason, they couldn't get your technology to work. And you just rolled with it. You didn't get mad. You gave a wonderful talk in spite of it. And, it was really cute how you kept saying, and if I had my slide, it would say, and that's what I was really impressed the way you handled yourself in that situation. And you still were able to give a really good talk, even though you couldn't get your slides.
Well, thank you. If you had seen me give a talk 10 years earlier, you would have seen where the preparation came from, because I learned by doing it the wrong way. I had a presentation that was very heavily technology based. It was at an online learning conference. I think it was like the year 2000. I was one of the most popular topics. I talked about how we can apply the principles of coaching to online learning, and it was at the Denver Tech Center, which I thought was going to be technologically advanced, but they couldn't get the internet to work. The slides weren't working, and I stood up for an hour and a half and sucked. and I got such bad reviews, and people were leaving in droves. And the conference never asked me back. That's where I learned that you'd better show up with something other,
Yeah.
With the lights go out, you've got to be ready to talk. So I did learn from a very painful experience to prepare.
When I recently saw you in North Carolina, you helped me with my technology because they didn't have anybody there to do that. And I mean, they put me do a keynote in a room with vendors that was acoustically challenged. I mean, it's just hilarious, some of the circumstances under which we're expected to speak. So, and I got a little bit rattled, I'll be honest, but I like that you kept your cool. I love the speech or the lecture you gave on the cruise, and you gave some of it, actually, you spoke once to our Ultimate Weight Loss group. You seem to know a lot about habits and changing habits. Where does that come from? And you want to share just maybe a little bit of, just things that could help people about that? Like you give the analogy about the teeth. I love that, the teeth brushing. That's very cool. I always remember that.
Yeah. No, so I try to steal from the best. So that so basically, I mean, I spent 15 years working in organization change and with entrepreneurs, and I gradually, I morphed into being a marketing consultant. So I would kind of help entrepreneurs develop marketing plans and execute them, and it quickly became apparent that the strategy itself was the easiest part. Like we'd say, okay, now you're going to do a weekly newsletter, or you're going to go to local networking events and you're going to do stuff. And the hard part was getting people to actually do it. You know, like, it's very easy to tell people, okay, here's what you do. But the clients of mine who are succeeding seem to be able to change their behaviors, to change their habits. So I knew that if I wanted to be successful, I would have to get better at coaching people, at really helping them change. And so through the work I had done with organization change, I began studying who are the most effective coaches, what are the most effective techniques. I've been coached by dozens of people. I've coached over 1,000 people in the business world, and now I'm coming up on 30 or 40 in the health world. And so none of this is my original ideas or research. It's all just taking the stuff that seems to work and helping. And not everything works for everybody. So I have there's a whole bunch of people whom I've interviewed who help with weight loss. You have an approach that works really well for the people that it works for. Right, and I have other people who have other approaches. So sure. It's really important to give people options that are going to fit them. So the toothbrushing thing is I think it's actually flossing.
Yeah,
so I got this from B.J. Fogg, who's a Stanford professor, and his basic idea is that behavior comes from three things. It comes from our motivation. So if we're going to do something, we're going to have to want to do it. And it comes from our ability. That if we want to do something, we have to be able to do it. And it comes from an environmental trigger or some sort of trigger that reminds us to do the behavior. So in other words, you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to pee.
Yeah.
You're very motivated to pee. Depending on how tired you are or how cold it is, you might have more or less ability to get out of bed.
Yeah.
But the trigger is you were just woken up with a full bladder. So that's sort of a calculus that you can use. Like, why didn't I do that? I really wanted to. Let's say someone's in your ultimate weight loss, and you have them eat a pound of vegetables in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And someone says, well, I know to do that. I know how to do that. I even went and bought all the Trader Joe's vegetables, the frozen stuff that Chef AJ told me to. I put it in my fridge. I've made it a bunch of times, so I know I can do it. I know where the pot is. I know how to boil water. I know how to do all this stuff, and yet I'm not doing it. Why not? So then we use this formula, behavior equals motivation times ability times a trigger, and we see what's missing. So you wake up in the morning and the frozen vegetables are in the back of the freezer. And in front of them is, your family's, boxes of Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah.
Or the kitchen's dirty in the morning. You don't clean it at night. So you come in the morning. The easiest thing is just to pop some toast into the toaster. Right. So we can see there's no trigger. There's no reminder. So I'd say to that person, maybe the night before, let's say you're going to steam it with a pot of water in a steamer basket. Put it up. Put the basket in the steamer. Add the water. Have it on the stove. So that'll remind you. Okay, now I just need to reach into the freezer and grab the vegetables. Now there might be a problem of ability. Like, it's actually harder to get the vegetables out of the back of the freezer than in the front. Of course. So if somebody's really, really motivated, if you tell someone you got to make vegetables for breakfast this morning or you're going to die, none of that is a problem, right? But the lower our motivation, the easier we have to make it for ourselves, and the hotter we have to make the trigger. So most people, when they try to change behavior, really focus on I've got to motivate myself. But as you said in our conversation that you and I taped for my podcast yesterday, willpower or motivation is a very fleeting thing. Like, some days I get up, I'm really motivated to exercise, to eat right, to look good. Other days I get up, I don't really give a crap. I feel bad about myself. I'm worried about something. I'm worried about finances. I'm worried about my kids. And at those days, I'm like, I don't really care enough to eat well. That's when it has to be so easy and so ingrained, And
Yeah.
the triggers have to be there that I do it anyway, even though I'm not highly motivated that day. Because if you rely on motivation, your behavior is just a roller coaster.
Well, isn't there a saying that motivation doesn't last, but either does bathing, which is something like that? Didn't somebody say something similar to that? I forget. It was somebody really well known, but that does make sense. That the lower. So you're saying the lower the motivation we have, the hotter we have to make the trigger. That's really cool. That's very helpful, actually.
Yeah, and the easier we have to make it, and
Right.
one way to make it easier is through environment, and another way is through skill.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're motivated, it's really important to harness that motivation so that you'll still do the behavior when you're not motivated anymore.
And that's where preparation comes in, right? Because we teach everyone to do batch cooking. I mean, whether they're trying to lose weight or just reverse a disease or just be healthy or just they're busy people, preparation is really important.
Yeah, yes, because then you're not. Garth likes to talk about game time decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call an audible on lunch.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're going to make the easiest decision, and as you know, in our culture, the easiest thing to eat is almost always the worst.
Fast food, the junk, right? Exactly. Well, that would make sense. When you explain it this way, this is very helpful, and I hope you enjoy talking about this because I think it'll be helpful to our listeners. When I think about my mentor, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who's probably followed the healthiest version of the plant-based diet the longest, a SOS-free, gluten-free, whole food plant-based diet for 40 years since he was 16 years old. He's made it so easy because he lives it. Well, he doesn't live at True North, but he has. But 21 out of 20 meals are chef prepared at True North. So he never has to make a decision. And that one meal that he's away from the center, he goes home and he cooks himself. I mean, when you don't have to think because I'm reading a book on habits now, and they say when something becomes automatic, you don't have to think about it. And that's kind of what you were talking about, I think, in your talk about flossing your teeth. People that floss their teeth generally floss all of them. They don't just say, well, today I'm just going to floss one. It becomes like this automatic habit.
Right. Well, something I read recently, I can't remember the source, and I wish I could because it's a really good statement, is like, what's the definition of a habit? And this source said that a habit is something that when you don't do it causes you pain.
Interesting. Almost sounds like an addiction in some ways, because for people with addictions, when they don't do it, it causes them pain as well. So I think addictions and habits are sort of cousins.
Yeah, imagine if you're a flosser, imagine just flossing the top and then throwing the floss away and not doing the bottom. Wouldn't that bug you?
It'd be weird, yeah, because I'd feel like, it's funny because I never was a flosser. I mean, my dental hygiene suffered, and then they invented these things that you can use with one hand. You know what I'm talking about? These dental
little plastic things.
Oh my God! Because then it's like I could do it dry. I mean, since those, I've had perfect dental checkups because flossing was one of those things. It's like, it wasn't a habit, but now with these little green things, they're accessible. They're discreet, and I love them. I really look forward to flossing. So, my question is how do we raise people's motivation? Is it even possible? Because when I think about in my coaching practice, I really prefer to work with people that are highly motivated, because people that are highly motivated, I know I'm going to get them the results they seek. So how do you motivate people? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. So before, my main gig in the marketing world was a program called Google AdWords. And I did it for so long that it really has imprinted itself on my brain and my thinking. And basically, Google AdWords is Google's advertising program. So if you go to Google and you go to their search page, you just do a search, you'll see on the right and sometimes on the top a bunch of ads. And that's what I helped businesses do. It was an extremely competitive, complex set of algorithms to do it well. And it took a lot of skill. And people who did it well made a lot of money. And here's why it was so interesting. That when somebody goes to Google and does a search, by definition, they're motivated. They're looking for something. They want something. Right? And they type in words that serve as kind of a proxy for what they want. So here we are selling to to people who are hot in the moment, right? So if you type in, new tennis racket or lens-free DSLR camera or whatever it is, that means you're looking for it at that moment, which means all I have to do is say, hey, I got it. And if you look at my ad and you say, oh, yeah, I believe you, you got it, and it looks better than what everybody else has, you're already motivated. I don't have to convince you that you want to buy a DSLR camera. That work has already been done. And it's so much easier to work with people who are already motivated. And the thing is, everybody's motivated to some degree or another to get something.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the mistakes I think we've made in the plant-based community is very often we approach people with our motivations as opposed to tying our results to their motivations.
Uh-huh.
So, we're all about, go vegan for your health, for the planet, for the animals. And people just want to know, like, I want to take fewer meds, or I want to have fewer side effects, or I'm tired of being overweight. Right? So when we can frame our solutions in terms of solutions to problems that people are aware of, they're already motivated. One of my favorite books on marketing is called Breakthrough Advertising, and he makes the point, you can't, a sailor can't make the wind blow, but a good sailor can use whatever wind there is more effectively than the rest. And so, motivation, we can stoke it, right? People come to what the heck is your thing called? Healthy Taste of LA. And they get pumped up. And by the time they're ready to leave, they're really motivated. They're on a high.
Mm-hmm.
So we can create those temporary highs. And I think we should. And I think that's a very useful, ethical thing to do. But I think we're kidding ourselves if we send people home from that high, and we think that our job is done. I think at that point, if I have people in front of me and they're on a high, I want them to do something that will make the change more likely to become permanent. Mm-hmm. So in other words, sign up for coaching.
Right.
Or, you know what, buy yourself an Instant Pot, right? Well, I bought the Instant Pot when I heard you speak at Summerfest. You did the red lentil chili demo. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there. I think the room was wired. I think I could get internet. I was sitting there typing notes on my computer. I went to instantpot.com, and before your demo was out, you'd made $50 off of me.
Wow. Well, actually, I just so you know, I don't take any kickbacks from the company, honestly, because I wanted to be able to promote it because I really believed in it. But thank you for buying.
Oh, okay.
I think, I hope people don't think I get the $50. I don't get anything. Actually, the what's it called? The fee that they would have given me would be $7, and I've refused it because I want to really have people know that I believe in this product and I love it, and I'm not getting anything for doing it because I didn't feel right taking what's that commission or whatever they call it.
Yeah, your affiliate commission. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But thank you for bringing that up. But boy, it would sure be nice if hey, if I got $50 for every pod, I'd really be selling the heck. But I'm glad you bought one because I've never met anybody that was unhappy with one. I have two, and I love them. I use them every day.
Yeah, so it arrived after I got home, probably a week later, and by that time, honestly, like my motivation was waning. It wasn't like, 6 days later, I couldn't stop dreaming about your red lentil chili. Like I had stopped dreaming about it. It was like, life rushes in to fill the void, and then the Instant Pot arrived. I'm like, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I am going to show my family this amazing red lentil chili. And so I went to the store and I bought all the ingredients. And I still have, you still have most of the ingredients. You don't use them all up in one. Mm-hmm. So now I have a thing on my kitchen counter. It's a big thing that plugs in. It sits there every day, and it says, "Don't you want to make something healthy and delicious today?"
I know. That is such a great. What you're saying is great because my Instant Pot is on my counter too, and it really does make healthy food easy and delicious, and I never thought about using it in the way you're talking about, but it really is a great visual cue. or trigger, however you want to call it,
Yeah, another teacher and friend of mine, Sean D'Souza, psychotactics.com, he talks about habits in a way that they define us. So he says, what makes people drink coffee? So people drink coffee because they drink coffee, like they become a coffee drinker, and you do the habit, and it becomes your identity, and the identity then reinforces the habit. So it's circular. So if I wake up in the morning, and the kind of question that comes to me is, well, who am I? And I look around, and I quickly get all these clues. Oh, look, I have like this all-natural, no-fluoride toothpaste. Look, I have dental floss there. Look, I go in the kitchen, and I have the Instant Pot, and I go into the fridge, and I have tons of produce. So, oh, okay, well, I know who I am. I'm a person who takes care of myself. And so, creating the environment is both a reflection of who you are and an enabler of who you are.
Yeah.
So one of the easiest ways to change who you are is to change your environment.
Yeah, Howard, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I always say in general, and in the Ultimate Weight Loss program specifically, is your environment is going to be your number one predictor of your success. So I agree wholeheartedly about the environment.
Right, and it's a pretty good hardwiring in general. Evolution never realized that we would be in the situation we're in, where you can buy candy bars at the pet store.
Ugh, ridiculous, huh?
Right.
Or even
Right.
that we even have candy bars. I thought of who said motivation doesn't last, but neither does baiting. It was Zig Ziglar. I just want to give him credit because he said that. One of the things you've said before, and I believe you said it was from BJ Fogg, and I use it too, is that you want to turn a bad day into good data. I love that. So when people relapse, instead of saying they're bad, I'm like, well, you got some great information, didn't you?
Yeah, that's from Change Anything.
Oh, I'm reading that book. I mean, I have read it. It's great. That's a great. We seem to be reading a lot of the same books, but I get a lot of my recommendations from Pam Popper, so that's where I, every time she says a book's good, I go out and read it.
I know. I'm the same way, and occasionally she'll mention a book that I've already read, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the best book you've ever read, or what's your favorite book? Because you seem like you're a voracious reader, and obviously a great writer too. People that seem to like to read also write, vice versa, sometimes.
Okay. Well, that's an impossible question, but I will tell you the book we're currently in love with right now, because I just finished it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Beyond Words.
Oh.
Have you heard of it?
I haven't. What's it about?
It's about animals.
Ooh, nice.
Every ethical vegan in the world needs to read this book and buy 80 copies for all their friends.
Okay.
The author, I don't believe he's vegan. He never mentions it. But he writes about what is it like to be an animal? What are the life experiences of animals? And he chooses three in particular: African elephants, Yellowstone, or I can't remember. I think it's Yosemite, gray wolves. No, I guess Yellowstone, and killer whales.
Ooh.
And he goes into their lives, into their social structure, but as a scientist, but as a scientist who says these are real beings. They're not just like when you say, like the way science looks at animals. It's like, well, they appear to be doing a mating dance, or the dog appears to be happy, but we can't say. It would be anthropomorphic to say the dog is happy or the two dolphins love each other, right? That's somehow out of bounds. And he's saying this is ridiculous. Like and the appreciation I had of animals, not just those three, but mainly those three species. It was just one of the most beautiful books.
It sounds wonderful. Thank you I love books about animals. I read All Creatures Great and Small when I was young, and I wanted to become a veterinarian because of it. Sounds like a wonderful book.
And the author's name is Carl Safina. He has a TED Talk, and unfortunately, the world is making his book a little bit apocalyptic. That all these three amazing species are all doomed unless we wake up and do something very soon. But he describes individuals. They're not just a species. He'll talk about Echo the elephant, and J53 the killer whale, and you get to know them as characters in their own poignant dramas of life and death, and I feel like there's going to be so much lost, so much nobility lost if these creatures disappear. And it is just such a beautifully written, researched, and an argued book.
Well, thank you. I'm putting that on my list. It sounds wonderful, especially if it comes on audio. That's how I get most of my reading done, because living in LA, we're in our cars a lot. So that's
the author reads his own book very well.
I love that. So is it different coaching people in business than it is in the health arena? Is it more challenging in the health arena than it is in business? Because I think that I've never met somebody that was overweight that didn't want to lose weight, but yet it just seems so difficult for people to make health changes, at least, the ones I've met.
Yeah, it's definitely easier in the business world, in my experience. Mm-hmm. Partly that's because of a self-selection bias. The people who come to me in coaching in the business world are largely entrepreneurial. So they're kind of at a higher echelon of agency, of just ability to make stuff happen.
Yeah.
There's also a heck of a lot less confusion in the business world than in the health world.
Okay.
So if you think about how to make money, well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of bad advice in the business world, but it's very easy to help people see that it's bad advice. Right. So if you gave someone the equivalent of a prescription for eating paleo, a business description, they would quickly go broke, and they would see, oh, well, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Whereas if you eat paleo, you could do well for 10 years before all the systems break down. Right. So in business, feedback is much quicker. It's much more objective. Look, I tried this. Did it work? No, it didn't work. Okay, I'm going to try something else. So it's much easier to be iterative and to receive feedback. I think there's probably lots of other reasons that it's easier to get people to change in business than in health. Probably health is much more intimate. Our eating habits, our moving habits, I think they're more caught up with our emotions than, say, how do I craft an email or how do I make an offer?
Sure. Going back to I keep harping on one of the things. Harping is not the right word, but I appreciate one of the things you said, because my mind is just thinking about how I'm going to use this to help other people, about how when motivation is low, we have to make it easy. And that would explain why fast food is so popular. It's not because it's necessarily even cheap, which it is, or even tasty. I think it's because it's so easy. 24 hours a day, you can just drive up to a window and get your calories.
Yep. A friend of mine and I, Peter Bregman, who's written a couple of great books, including 18 Minutes and 4 Seconds. A while back, we were thinking of writing a book called Sneaking Fruit into the Movies. Because we thought, like, it is so hard to be healthy. But there are so many obstacles. Like, if you wanted to eat healthy while watching a movie, which is, it's kind of like Americans' entertainment default is let's go to the movies. You actually have to, like, break the law. You have to hide things in your bag.
Exactly.
Right? Like, hey, you can't take that in here. You can't take those apples and bananas into this theater. You're not, you're going to buy our jujubes.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I never understood why people have to even eat in a movie. My husband, who's slender, he always gets popcorn at the movie, and I'm thinking, like, but you just had dinner, and it annoys me because I hate hearing people eat. That's why, I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and every week I get a movie, and I love it because they don't allow any food. And to me, that's how you really enjoy a movie, is in silence, not in chomping.
Yeah, Brian Wansink of Cornell has a lot of interesting studies on people eating in movies. Do you know his work?
I love him. I've interviewed him. Yes, where they kept filling even though the popcorn was stale, if it was free, they things like that.
Yeah. So that these things are rituals. There's so many food-based rituals that we simply do regardless of what our stomachs are telling us. And I've been there. I've eaten to the point where I'm far. You talk about until you're comfortably full. The comedian Louis C.K.
He's great.
He He says, I don't understand that. You don't eat until you're full. You eat until you hate yourself.
Oh, that's hilarious. Or you eat until the bucket is empty, basically. Even that's what people are used to. But that's just so great. So really, if we want to make permanent changes, we have to set up our environment to support us and make it easy. When I was thinking about, I went from being a couch potato for almost 52 years to a person that I don't know if I enjoy it, but that exercises regularly. And I remember when I started out, I didn't really have anybody coaching me in this, but I knew I had to do it. And what I would do is, honestly, the days, like I started with something called spinning, because I figured if I don't love exercise, I'll pick the exercise I hate the least, which was spinning, because you're done in 45 minutes. You're burning like 400 to 600 calories. I would actually sleep in my clothes, everything except for the tennis shoes, because so that I would be ready. I would do the 7 o'clock class, and I would prepay. And if I didn't cancel within 24 hours, I'd be out $18. And so I was motivated financially, and just, I did it until it became a habit. And then, now I do it. But I remember I had to actually sleep in my clothes, because it was just too hard for me to get up and put clothes on for some reason to go to the gym.
Yeah, and you're using another really important principle of behavior, which is that we are more sensitive to loss than gain.
Ah.
Right. So are you familiar with the website stick.com, which is like the word stick with an extra K at the end?
No, but you bet I'm going to check it out after we get done talking, because it sounds fantastic.
Here's how it goes. Let's say you and I decide, okay, we're gonna run 20 miles a week, and we want to hold each other accountable. So you go in to stick.com, set up an account, and you choose a charity or a cause that you absolutely hate.
Oh boy.
And if you don't keep your commitment, you put in money in escrow that's going to go to that group.
Heck, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So.
Right. So if I could have $100 on the line going to the NRA.
Oh boy.
Right. Or like some Rick Berman front group for the food industry. Like Consumer Rights Council or something like that. And if I don't do this, they're going to get the money. Boy, am I motivated.
Mm-hmm. That sounds fascinating. Yeah, that's so people are more motivated by like a loss than a gain. In other words, they're more.
Yeah, people are roughly twice as motivated to avoid loss. So they would do more to avoid losing $100 than to gain $200.
That is so interesting. Can you apply that to weight loss? Because, now that I'm slender, to me, I value it so much. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize it. But it seems that so many people actually gain the weight back. So if that was true with weight, wouldn't people, once they lost weight, be really, really motivated to maintain it? Because it doesn't seem that way. It seems it's harder for people to maintain it actually than to lose it.
Yeah, I have to think about that. It doesn't. Nothing immediately jumps to mind. I would need to.
Okay. Well, think about it and get back to me, because what I want to talk about. You had mentioned Sally Fallon earlier in the Weston Price Foundation going after Dr. Campbell when he wrote the China study.
Yeah.
How is this even possible? The quality of information we get regarding health and wellness, diet and nutrition from researchers, journals, governments, media, social media, from friends. How do you feel about that? And the truth, how does it get so hidden and distorted? Because I know you know a lot about this, because you've got your fingertips on the pulse of this. So talk a little bit about that. We'll switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, we are living. There's been a number of people who said it. I didn't invent the phrase information-borne illnesses.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
But and this is one of the things that we looked at specifically in Whole, is like when Dr. Campbell set out to write Whole, he wanted to answer the question, okay, the China study kind of lays it all out. And, he didn't think that many people were going to read the China study, but then all of a sudden it became a huge thing, and like millions of people were reading it. It sold over 1 million copies. It's been translated into how many languages? Governors, senators, former presidents have read it. It's become a big deal. And at that point, you'd think, well, why isn't anything changing? And then he wanted to look at these two factors. One is the way science is done, which is basically reductionist, which only looks at tiny details out of context, and misses the big picture, and what he calls subtle power, which is money that works its influence in subtle ways. And so, did you see yesterday there was a study that made the news about how eating vegan is much worse for the environment than eating animals?
I haven't, but how does stuff like that even get out there? I can't believe that's true, first of all, but who perpetuates these lies?
Right. Well, I think these were researchers at Carnegie Mellon, and I have to say I haven't gotten the original study. I first saw this from Garth Davis's Facebook feed, and bless his heart, he went and paid $45 for the actual reprint of the study because it was in such an obscure journal that the University of Texas doesn't carry it in its online catalog. So that'll tell you something, right? So this is a fairly obscure thing. But and he talked a lot about the errors that they make, and also Eric Marcus of vegan.com had a piece on it. So I haven't verified this. I haven't asked Dr. Garth to send me a copy. I will not pay $45 for it. What Eric said was, okay, let's compare lettuce to bacon. So they're looking at, let's say, 500 calories of bacon versus 500 calories of lettuce, and which one requires more water? Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think requires more water, 500 calories of bacon or 500 calories of lettuce?
I think the bacon.
Nope. It's
really?
The lettuce. It's how much lettuce is in 500 calories?
Oh, a lot, because lettuce is only 100 calories a pound.
Yeah,
and it's mostly water. It's mostly, it's 90% water probably.
It's mostly water. So you're taking, first of all, they're choosing the worst vegetable food, comparing it to the best animal food, and then they're comparing, 2 strips of bacon to how many pounds of lettuce?
Oh my. Yeah.
So a field of lettuce, if it's like iceberg, that has very few calories, doesn't it? Isn't that less than 100 a pound?
Well, they say that raw vegetables are about, could be less. I can look it up right now if you like to give you the exact answer, but it's very, very low in calories.
Right. So it's not a fair comparison, and and what they're doing is they're using volumetrics against itself. They're comparing things that are simply incomparable. And, so we're talking about, how many people do you know get all their calories from lettuce?
Nobody. Maybe a rabbit.
Right?
Not even a rabbit, probably.
Yeah, well, you ever see a rabbit? You ever see them not eating?
They have to, because they're eating such low-calorie food.
Right. Animals that eat low-calorie foods, that's their profession. You ever see a horse eats 20 hours a day? I'm sitting here. My chickens are they're basically, they do nothing but eat. I'm sure they're chatting and socializing, but it's in the context of pecking at things. They're pecking at greens. They're pecking at the compost. Maybe they're finding little bugs. So to compare bacon to lettuce in terms of calories is ridiculous. Now, why don't we compare bacon to legumes? Yeah. And then we see the environmental impact of the legumes are much better. Plus, they're not looking at the factory farm. If you have a pig living on scraps and drinking from a stream, like in the old days, people would keep a pig around and they'd slaughter it at Christmas, or they'd have a few chickens and they would just get the scraps and it was part of sort of a natural ecosystem. Then those animal products can be very environmentally benign. But when you have the factory system that we have, you're simply giving, as Dr. McDougall says, people good news about their bad habits. So the question is, where does this come from? And let's start with the question: why does this get so widely reported? It's because people like good news about their bad habits. Who do you think posts this stuff? There was a post on the IFL Science Facebook page about this, and so all the paleo people are like, I told you, this is great. So people who are already motivated to share this news will share it, right? Vegans tend not to share it except to debunk it. We like to share our own studies. So everyone is perpetuating the information that they already want to believe. But then, like, how does this stuff get reported? And actually, when Garth wrote about it, he read the whole study. He said it's actually quite nuanced, and that was one of the findings. But there was a lot of other really interesting findings about inputs, about water, about land use, and there was a lot to speak of about this study. There was some of it that was quite valuable and serious, but that was all ignored by the media. Because we're living in a new era of yellow journalism. So if you remember the story, like the newsies, the newsboys, who'd stand on the street with the tabloids, and they had to sell the newspaper based on the sensational headlines, right? And so we had what's called an era of yellow journalism. You had tabloids that could fold, so they have a giant headline, maybe a graphic image, and it was incendiary, and so people had to buy it to open up the newspaper to find out what it said. Then a lot of newspapers switched to a subscription model, and then that allowed them to focus more on serious journalism. They had to develop a brand of trust as opposed to stirring people's emotions in the moment. Well, guess what? Newspapers are dead or dying. People now get their news. The media is all moving online, and advertising is based on page views and time on page and what's called engagement, which means likes, dislikes, comments, and replies to comments.
Wow.
So if that's the way things are, then what do you want to have in your newspaper? You want to have incendiary, inflammatory things that are going to get people riled up, controversies that are going to make people mad, so they will click through the link and they're going to engage on the page. And they love it when people get into big fights. And so the quality of reporting is now based on this. I was just watching an episode of season 3 of The Newsroom, the Aaron Sorkin HBO show. And one of the plot lines is the questioning the integrity of a reporter who's now moved from a TV network to one of these online, the websites, where she's getting bonuses for page views. And the question is, can she report objectively and not hype things when she's getting paid based on how many people are going to click through the headline to read the article? So who's going to click more? An article about the complex system of inputs and outputs of animal versus plant-based agriculture, or bacon's better than broccoli?
Yeah, well, of course, that's why they put, like, on Time Magazine, they'll put those things right on the cover. And the thing is people will believe it without even reading the article. That's what gets me, Howard. It's like they'll look at a cover, it'll say something that supports their bad habits, and they'll speak it as if it's just the truth without even investigating it further.
Right. So, so we're not trained to go to the source. Most people are not interested in the truth. Most, we can't handle the truth.
Right.
Our friend Pam Popper has just done for her Inner Circle members a review of Wheat Belly by William Davis.
Yeah.
And she had an intern go through and pull out every single one of his references and go get the paper, print it off, give her a pile, and she went off and read every single one of the papers and then correlated it with what Davis said it said, and said that most of the time it didn't say that.
Yeah, so that's very interesting that they put the references, but that is really that's horrible, actually.
Yeah. So the question is, I'm willing to give Davis a pass. I don't know him. Certainly, I know enough about medical education to know that he probably wasn't trained in statistics. He probably wasn't trained in evidence-based practice. Most doctors are not evidence-based. They don't know the literature, and they're very susceptible to skinny former cheerleaders in miniskirts coming in with food and giving them glossy reprints about the efficacy of their drugs.
That's funny. You even talk like a writer. I got the visual so well. Skinny former. I mean, because every time I go to the doctor, that's exactly what's there. Some very attractive blonde with they all have that same little, the thing they roll with all their drug samples.
Yep.
That's
yep. I used to work with them. one of my marketing gigs was with companies that did clinical trials, and so I was fairly ensconced in the pharmaceutical world. And there's actually an article in the New York Times several years ago specifically about pharmaceutical companies were recruiting cheerleaders out of college because the doctors would spend more time with them.
Yeah, because they're of course. You know, again, this is so depressing. You know, some of the stuff you're talking about. How do we get the truth out to people? Do people even want the truth? You know, seems like the truth.
Well, I've started wearing mini skirts, but it doesn't seem to help.
Well, you shaved your head too. I don't know. You know, that's not as that might not be appealing, not having those long locks for people to run their fingers.
Yeah, well, genetics made that decision for me. I just sped it up a bit.
That's funny because when you had hair a couple years ago when I met you, did it go that fast, huh?
No. I just saw myself in one of those mirrors at the clothing store. I saw the back of my head, and I was like, "Who's that? There's no hair there."
That's so funny. That is so funny.
I decided not to go gentle into the good night of baldness.
That's funny. So who are your inspirations, Howard, either in your life or in the plant-based world or just in general that gets you doing what you're doing, helping people?
Well, mostly. So I mean, I have sort of educational, mentor influences. Certainly, the top of the list would be Colin.
Yes, he's great.
Certainly colleagues like Dr. McDougall, Goldhammer, Lyle, Garth Davis.
I love them all. Mentioning all my faves.
Right, and then there's the practitioners, the people like you and Lanny, Sharon McRae, people who are like have figured out kind of how to help people on an individual basis, and people like Antonia Demas and Amy Hamlin, who figured out the organizational thing, like how do you make larger changes. Certainly, folks like James Cameron.
Yeah.
I had a talk yesterday with a British bodybuilder who went vegan. He's actually like friends and training partners with Mr. Universe, Bonnie Duplessis. This guy is Paul Curtin. And when you talk to people who so confound your expectations, like this sort of big British bodybuilding meathead, and he's talking about compassion and animals and selfless service. So actually I find inspiration almost everywhere I look.
Yeah.
Mostly these days from my own clients, from my own circle of friends, from people who have to me, inspiration comes from courage. So when people like Campbell and Esselstyn stand up and say, I'm going to throw my career up in the wind and we'll see where it lands because I believe in this. That's inspiring.
Absolutely. So people want to listen to your wonderful Plant Yourself podcast or get coached by you, or obviously if they want your books, they can get them on Amazon, Whole and Proteinaholic. If they want a little bit more Howard, how do they find out about you?
Yeah. Well, so you can go to plantyourself.com, and I have archives of all the old shows. I'm up to 133 this week. You and I recorded one that will be somewhere in the 130s. So
sure.
One of the pieces of evidence that I'm maturing is that I now do them in advance.
Yeah.
So I don't have to wake up in the morning and go, now what do I do?
Yeah. Yep. I love your podcast. Was there like a favorite guest you had, or I'm sure all your guests are wonderful, but like, was there one that was just really surprising or just so interesting that you didn't expect, or because you have some people that I've never heard of, and then I listen and now I've heard of them, and
Yeah. I've had so many wonderful interviews where I just felt such a connection. I have to say, the reason I started the podcast was that I wanted to attract John Robbins. Like, I wanted to talk to him.
Did you end up interviewing him?
I did.
Great.
And he was the most gracious person. And then he emailed me after the call. He said, "Can we get back on? I forgot some stuff I wanted to say." So I actually did 2 with him.
Wow. I just interviewed his son, who's also a remarkable person. The Ocean, the apple, obviously doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I interviewed Ocean as well. I did a really fun interview recently with someone who's not at all plant-based.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Dina Rose, and she wrote a book called It's Not About the Broccoli.
Ah.
And it was really, she talks about all the mistakes we make when we try to get our kids to eat right. And I would say 95% of what she says is totally applicable to the plant-based world. 5%, I think, either needs tweaking or is unnecessary. But when I first saw the title, I thought, uh-oh, she doesn't want us to eat broccoli. But what she's talking about is holism as opposed to reductionism. She tells all these parents who are like desperate to get their kids to eat right, and so they do it with a checklist. Like ice cream, I don't want them to eat ice cream, but at least it has calcium. Well, I don't want them to eat McDonald's chicken nuggets, but at least it has protein. So they're eating a totally crap diet, but they're doing all the checkoffs of the nutrients they've heard of.
Mm.
Right? And so she's unknown in the plant-based world because, when you look at her menu plans, she sees pizza as something you never want to give your kids. Well, you and I know we can make amazing, healthy pizzas.
Sure.
But, but something like, roasted chicken with vegetables or yogurt she'll see is very good. So she doesn't understand the research. I invited her I said I'd send her a copy of Whole if she wanted it. But the point is, she had, I thought, amazing insights. And I've gotten some good feedback from friends and clients that they found that really helpful. Even plant-based people, like, here are the mental mistakes we make when we try to get our kids to eat healthy, and here's some things to do instead that's much easier and much more likely to work.
Wow. You've given me so many great book recommendations today. I don't know how I'm going to have time to do these all before the end of the year. So that's great. So it's just been a pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you all day, but I have one more question, just kind of a fun question. I visited your home in North Carolina, your farm, and met your chickens and saw your walnuts, and you have sweet potatoes that you grow. They're about the size of your head. What's your favorite what's your favorite recipe? What's your favorite thing to eat?
Oh, let's see. I am really digging baked sweet potato fries.
Oh, me too.
Right now we got so many sweet potatoes. Anything that can make a sweet potato go down is
that's probably
is a favorite.
If some reason somebody said you could only live on one food, like for whatever reason, I think I would have to pick the sweet potato.
Yeah, so I've been experimenting with like sweet potato pies and cakes. What else can I put sweet potato in?
Pudding. I'll give you a great pudding recipe, and I'll give it to everybody right now. And now, Howard, are your sweet potatoes the orange ones? Are they the white ones? Which color? Because I'm not sure it makes a difference.
Yeah, we've got three. We've got orange, white, and purple.
Okay. Well, I've never done it with the white and the purple, but I'll give you and everyone listening this recipe right now. It's from Marie Reddy in Ohio. She's a member of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and in a potluck at Wendy's Organic Healthy Girls Kitchen House, she brought this. She called it fall pudding. With her permission, I'm calling it butterscotch pudding now because it looks and tastes exactly like Hunt's Snack Pack butterscotch pudding that I ate as a child. It's 3 or 4 ingredients at the most. So you take your sweet potatoes. I like to use the orange ones because otherwise the color won't be like butterscotch pudding, and I think they tend to be sweeter. And you roast them. It's really important you roast them, not steam them or microwave them, because roasting really brings out the sweetness and the caramelization. And depending on the size of the potato, you want to poke it, wash it and poke it. And I do it at about 400 for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on, because yours are really big. They're not going to cook in an hour, You let them cool, and then you put them in your Vitamix. You're going to need a high-powered blender for this, because you don't want to have to use any liquid. And the only other ingredient really is ripe bananas, but this pudding does not taste like bananas. The bananas provides the sweetness, but somehow when you combine the sweet potato and the ripe banana, I use about a half a cup of cooked sweet potato to each ripe banana, and about a half a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, some vanilla if you like it and have it. And the texture once you chill it is just like pudding. It'll blow your mind. It will really blow your mind. So please try it and get back to me. And it's so fantastic. And thank you, Marie, for creating such an amazing. Because you don't have to feel guilty because it's dessert, but it's actually food. It's a banana and a sweet potato. But somehow when you combine these two things, it doesn't taste like a banana and sweet potato. It tastes like butterscotch pudding. So you need some
Ooh,
of
I'm
that.
gonna
Yeah,
try that.
pumpkin pie spice or cinnamon. I'm telling you, it will blow your mind. I've served it to regular people, to children. Nobody knows it's healthy. Nobody even knows it's really sweet potatoes. So I'm glad I asked that question, because now I was able to give you a delicious recipe and a use for all those sweet potatoes you have.
Awesome. Hey, I thought of two things I'd love to throw in before we finish.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Of course.
So one is a response came to me about your question that stumped me earlier about why is it so hard to maintain weight loss if we fear loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what people focus on when they get to a healthy weight is, unless they've done a lot of work, the loss they fear is the loss of the foods that they like. So they're willing to do it for a short time, but how many people have told you, don't ask me to give up X for life?
Yeah, I'd rather die than give up cheese. I've heard that, believe me.
Right, cheese or chocolate or avocados or nuts or whatever it is. The thought of forever feels like a loss.
Mm-hmm.
So someone you should interview. Have you talked to Glenn Livingston?
He's on my queue. He just sent me his book, so I'm definitely going to interview him. I'm just a little behind, but yes, I haven't actually talked to him, but I'm going to be interviewing him.
So he is one of my dearest friends. He's done a tremendous lot for me in my career. Very, very generous guy and brilliant psychologist and marketer. And when he coaches people and he gets them to, and he'll tell you the whole system in the interview, but when he gets them to a rule that they're going to agree to, he wants to bring up all the voices that are likely to argue with it. And so he'll be inflammatory and provocative, and he'll say to you, so AJ, you've decided you're never going to have nuts again. So you're never going to touch a nut again until the day you die. And the way he phrases it makes people stop in their tracks. And because there's some part of them that says, well, no, just until we're better, just until the weight's off, right? But when you put it to someone like that, all their resistance will come up. And I think those resistances which are not dealt with, which are not matured into a cohesive game plan for the whole integral person, I think those are the things, the losses that we fear more than, oh no, I'm gaining the weight again.
Right. That's funny that we're more driven by what seems to be the negative than the positive, because what I've been learning more when I study addiction is that when people engage in these behaviors like eating, overeating, compulsive eating, or drugs or alcohol, it's not even so much to necessarily gain pleasure as it is to avoid pain. So it seems like we do more, like you said, to avoid loss than to have gain, and we seem to do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure even. So interesting.
Right. Well, because, if you think about it from just the evolutionary, Doug Lisle is big on this, of course, the evolutionary calculus, if pain means chance of death.
Right.
So that could happen at any moment. We always have to be vigilant against pain, against death. Mm-hmm. So we're naturally more hardwired to look for threats than opportunities, because you only need one opportunity to mate, and then you're set. Your genes are passed on. Yeah. Right? But you need to be vigilant against threat every moment.
Well,
so understanding that helps us figure out how we've tied our decision to have a Snickers bar in the car to our fundamental survival drive. Because some part of us, and Glenn will talk about this, some part of us really believes that if we don't have that Snickers bar, we will die.
In that moment.
How the hell do you argue with that?
Absolutely. Well, I think you need to write your own book about some of this stuff, because you have a lot of knowledge about these things, and I think it'd be great for Howard to write a book by himself.
All right. I just need a co-author to do it for me.
Exactly. I'll get you one. All right. Well, Howard, it's just been so delightful talking to you. Thank you so much for what you do to help people in your wonderful podcast, Plant Yourself. You can go to plantyourself.com, listen to over 100 scintillating, wonderful interviews. And thank all of you for listening to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Thanks, Howard.
Thank you for having me, AJ.
Okay. Take care. Bye, everyone.